Yeah.
It reminds me of a scripture in the Bible about renewing your mind. And I remember in my life there was definitely a point where, like, well, throughout my childhood there was a lot of things that went on. Obviously, my dad was alcoholic and things like that, and so I used to hold a lot of stuff in. Like, I never cried. I think I was quite angry, and I think the world kind of conditions you and makes you think that you have to be like a certain way, but then you eventually, like a few years ago, I realised it's okay. Like, you can show your emotions, you can cry, and I think going through that process, even though it's difficult at that time, is the most beautiful thing you can go through. Just to let go of everything and realise it's fine. Because at the end, like, it will definitely strengthen you up so much more, and it will just awaken your eyes to, like, the beauty in the world.
Yes, no, I absolutely. You've all sort of said it. Encourage feeling feelings, and Hawkins. I mean, I learned that from Hawkins. You know, the importance of feeling your feelings, and you know, Hawkins was an alcoholic. You know, his sponsor in the 12. He was very famous. That Bill Wilson was his sponsor, who founded that whole 12-step program for addictions, And as he explained, what is the ego and what is addiction, what is cutting you off from that sublime spiritual experiences and the peace and the happiness and the joy in the present moment. And it is just, the ego is just, you know, for me, very, very simplistic. It's quite simple what it is. Just a lot of belief systems, like you need to be thin to be happy, or if you're successful you'll be happy, all these thoughts. And also, what creates the huge disconnect from the lower levels of the map of consciousness, which should be, where's my map? Here it is. So right at the bottom of the levels of consciousness, it just means that you've got tons and tons of suppressed feelings and lots of belief systems which you think will sort of kill the system. So then you'd be right at the bottom, and actually so much suppressed. I like to think of it like suppressed steam. You've got so much pressure in there that's been suppressed through addictions and control mechanisms and beliefs, that, you know, you're more or less suicidal at the bottom, because literally you're cut off from the light of God, cut off from the presence, and all those. So it's like addicts, especially addicts. I'm an addict. I'm a food addict. You know, it's just to have suppressed all my life, all my feelings. Every time I had a feeling, I'll just eat, and it was just so. It just meant that it got worse and worse. You get cut off. And you have all of these thoughts, you know, if you're thinner, if you're more successful, all of that will fix. But the solution is not out there. It's actually to go the opposite way, to surrender. So surrendering means letting go of the thoughts and beliefs. And also, on the feelings aspect, it means what's the opposite of addiction is to feel your feelings. That's the 100%, you know, 100% of the opposite of doing that. And that's the way out. And like I think Anna was mentioning, and what Hawkins mentioned, if you go through these feelings, at the end, especially if it's an extreme feeling, there's a sublime peace to finally let go of these feelings. You know, like it could be the belief system that, oh, you know, for many, many years, one day I'll be thin, and then life will be happy. You know, and if you were to let that thought go, then a lot of feelings would come up. You know, it's the feelings of, you know, you actually sort of go through the grief process, you know. It's like, oh my God, first there's denial, that can't be true. Then there's anger. Oh my God, maybe it is true. And then there's grief. You know, it's like crying out that this, because the ego wants the happiness to be based on the belief when you get it. But if you let that go, the happiness is here now. But you have to go through the feelings. And the people I help in the program, I often mention to the new ones, you know, I was really proud of her. I had this sponsee, she's now in a different country, but, and I told her, you know, she really wanted to get well from food addiction, and I told her, you know, you must feel your feelings at every opportunity if you want to get well, you know, just, because it's like a golden doorway, you know, every time those feelings come up, that's your chance. It's like the lid that's been holding all of these feelings is open. So now's the opportunity. Don't push it down again. Don't wait till 10 minutes later. Now's your chance to experience it. And, you know, I loved this thing, and I listened to her every evening on our evening calls, and she would say, oh, I went to work and I felt like crying, and they were having, she was like a high-level executive. And, you know, the sponsees I have in my food fellowships are hilarious, because she was a high-level executive, marketing executive in a multinational food company. I thought that was just hilarious, the jobs they got, you know. It was like, what kind of company is she? Is she in like fashion? No, she's in a food company, marketing foods. But she was in a board meeting, and she felt like crying. She burst out crying in the middle of a board meeting. And they were all coming in saying, what's wrong, what's wrong? And she says, no, I just crying. And she cried it out. But that's the way you get well, to let go of all of that suppressed steam within. So yeah, and also for me, one of the major attitudes that I've developed to get well from all the stuff that I've been suppressed, I say the opposite attitude, I call it like the spiritual warrior attitude, which is like addicts, any feeling, suppress it or run away from it, distract yourself. And I call it the spiritual warrior attitude, is like, go full into the feeling and just go like 100% in and experience it until it passes. You know, like if suddenly you have a feeling, then it's like, no, I will sit with this feeling and I'll be with it, even if I die, until it passes. And actually that was one of the stories that I tell to a lot of my sponsees in food addiction, to share with them. In early food recovery, when I was getting abstinent from my food addiction, in the beginning, when I got abstinent, I suddenly woke up one morning at about 4 a.m. in the morning, and I had a panic attack, and it was like I couldn't breathe. And I went, and the very first time it happened, I was familiar with Hawkins, but I was like, I don't know if I should make excuses, but I think I was half awake, half asleep. And I just went down into the kitchen, and I just binged on food to get the feelings out, stop the feelings, and it worked. What was quite hilarious about it was like, I can't breathe, I'm suffocating. Would I call the doctor, the ambulance, try and get some oxygen? No. I went down and I just had food, and it stopped, I could breathe again. So it just showed it was psychosomatic, you know, it's like, you know, and it was like, you know, and I thought I was going to die, like there was no air going in, but somehow I was eating the food. And then, you know, I was mortified with it. And then the next, because I knew about Hawkins, was like, no, you made a mistake. And the next day, I had, not the next day, but a few days later, I had another panic attack. I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. And I just sat in my chair and actually put Hawkins on. And I had the attitude that I'll feel this feeling through. And if I die, feeling the panic attack, you know, if I can't breathe, I feel like you're suffocating to death. If I die, I'll die. I prefer to die than to pick up food or use in any way. And then I went, and it was like 15 to 20 minutes of like feeling like there was no air, and my ego was just saying, you're going to die, you're going to die, you know. And then it passed. And then I had about 2 or 3 more panic attacks, and after the first one I was much more courageous to go through them. And then more or less for about 6 or 7 years I've had no panic attacks since, apart from a mini one after I had a general anaesthetic in an operation, but more or less none. So it's like you face with feelings. It's like having the courage. Spirituality for me is having the courage to like. And I've now developed this attitude. You know, like difficult feelings, I want to sit through them. And I was so inspired by Dr. Hawkins when he, because I believe he was not only an alcoholic but a drug addict. He was a medical doctor, so he probably had, like most doctors, opened up the pill cabinet and popped in a few pills, just some painkillers for you, 1 painkiller for you, 10 for me, 1 for you, 10 for me. Yeah. So he probably liked to pop in the pills as well with the alcohol. The alcoholics have it, like, you know, they know how to like balance all the different stuff to get the right effect. So, but he became allergic to painkillers, so he wasn't able to have them. And in his spiritual condition, some of you probably know this, you know, he was out in the woods sawing trees and he sawed his thumb off. And then what was quite miraculous with that was that immediately he surrendered, so he was 100% present. And it healed quite quickly. Only 8 drops of blood after he cut his thumb off fell, so that was a miracle. But he had to have surgery. And he said to the doctor, you know, I can't have it, I'm allergic to anaesthetic, but don't worry, I can do self-hypnosis. And so he had surgery, and he had to just use the spiritual technique of feeling his feelings, which should be fun when they're sort of sawing your bones out. But he just 100% presence. And what he did say, when he resisted, it was excruciating, but he eventually went into a heavenly peace because he was 100% present, and he just went off into like a sublime heavenly bliss through. And I've actually experienced that as well, not in that extreme level, but in different ways. Like after my transplant operation, I was like determined not to use any painkillers afterwards, to just feel the pain and be 100% present with it. So I told the nurse, like, you know, I don't need the morphine pump, don't give me any painkillers with my medication. I was willing to, like, and I wanted to use what Hawkins did, which was the 100% presence with the pain. I wasn't as good as Hawkins, but I refused all painkillers. And what actually happened was I was just being present with the pain for about 7 or 8 hours until night time. And then I realized that I was probably not going to get to sleep because the pain was so strong. And then I had a little thought popped into my head and said, why don't you put some Muji on and listen to him? I just listened to Muji. It was quite miraculous. I listened to Muji, and whenever he said, like, who's doing it, I said, like, who's observing the pain? I just translated it for the pain. And I just fell asleep. So it was brilliant. Because, you know, it was like there was still an eye that was interested in the pain. But when we went to the observer, suddenly I was off to sleep, which was quite incredible. So I went through the whole experience without using any painkillers. And it's great because now I know, you know, if I get a little scrape on my fingers, that's nothing compared to going through the pain of an operation. So it's like you develop spiritual strength. You know, I can go through the feelings of losing somebody. I can go through the feelings of things not working out my way. I can go through the feelings of major surgery just by feeling the feelings. But I had something similar to Hawkins in two, I'm talking a lot, but in two respects. You know, like if you can be fully present with your pain, sometimes you can have the miraculous happen. And I've had that happen on a few occasions. I used to get cramps, I sometimes do still. And if you when a cramp just about starts, if you go, yes, 100% presence, it vanishes in a split second. You don't get a cramp. If you wait more than a second and you're not 100% present, then you get the full cramp. So that's a little tip if anyone ever has cramps. And the other one was actually, it's quite hilarious because I know there's probably some people with food issues here. I was in a hospital because in early recovery I was still a bit crazy, and I had like overeaten on bananas, so I was called in to hospital because they're taking my blood, like your potassium levels are too high, you're about to have a heart attack, so come in for emergency treatment. And they came in, and so they're about to inject me with this huge needle with this stinging solution to bring my potassium down. And I knew Hawkins, so I said, I'm going to be 100% present with it. So as they were putting the needle in, I just did the 100% present, and I was like going off into heaven, and you know, I more blissed out. And then they sort of came in, and they thought, I think they thought that I'd gone diabetic or something. So they gave me lots of sugary drinks, and I thought, well, should I stay in heaven or eat the sugary drinks? So I thought, okay, fair enough, I'll live with the sugary drinks. And I came in, but it worked. The point wasn't the sugary drinks. The point was, that if you know this huge needle was being injected into my vein to put in this emergency solution, and I just said no, 100% presence, and I did go like Hawkins. I experienced the same thing. You just bliss out, you know, just 100% present with it. You bliss out. So yeah, so always feelings are welcome in this room. You know, cry as much as you want, and it's good.
Okay. I found it. It's 20 years ago now. I had a clinical depression, and I was seeing a psychiatrist, and she's very wise. She knew this. She says, instead of avoiding it, you go right into the pain, and it really helped. It worked. So I was being in the moment and just feeling it. And it would lift for a while.
Yes, some of them have backlogs, so they keep coming up and you have to feel them through. And get, some of them are a bit bigger and some of them a bit smaller. But yeah, that's the spiritual principle. Go into it, don't run away from it.
Yeah, I was just liking what you said about, it was quite a while back, about when you let go of like a belief system, then you get the denial, anger, and
yes.
No matter what belief system. My little one yesterday, I had a timer on and I kept him repeating, there's no laws but God's, again and again when this timer went off, all day, and like everything that came up, like even if like I was, I don't know, something really like normal within my body, I'd just be like, there's no laws but God's and all of this. And a lot of things just like didn't really affect me that much, or a lot of beliefs kind of were like, oh. And then when I was sitting with you after meditation, I got really angry. And I was like, I have no excuses now, this is shit, like there's no belief system. My ego got so angry and I just realised that that's what it was, and it got really upset and pissed off that like all of these things, like they weren't real. So I was glad to hear that, yeah. I was telling her, I'd be like, yeah, I'm angry.
That's natural.
Yeah.
The course is quite mystical, and yeah, I mean the ego does get very, very angry, especially if you have a big belief system which is getting a lot of juice out of.
Yeah, it was around food, so it's probably quite like 5 star.
And it will try and sabotage the spiritual process and do anything to get you away, or at least distract you, and don't let it go. But yeah, it is actually all of the, you go through the classical stages of grief. So it can be denial, and then huge anger, and then the grief, you see. Like, no, it can't be true, or this is all wrong. And then like great anger that it could be right, and you wish God had made the world different so that the belief system could be true. Like I can eat as many cakes as I want and be thin and be amazing. So that has to be true. And if suddenly, and you live your whole life based on that belief, and then if you suddenly go, then in the beginning you go, no, the whole world is wrong, this, what I hold is true and I'm going to make it work. And then suddenly there's the dawning that it might be that that's a bloody bullshit. And then there's this huge anger at God, anger at everyone. You know, you want to either like run away and pretend it's not true again, or if you do, you just point, you want to kill somebody. And then eventually, when the anger starts to subside, then there's the grief, you know. And that's really good. When you get to the crying, that's the really, really good bit. Just keep crying it out. And then you get to the peace on the other end. And then you've let it go, or there might be another a tranche of it later on. But then you're more or less letting go. And then eventually it's like it was nothing.